in terms of my own training, when I first got into lifting, I had a really, really high volume approach to training. And I felt like I needed a lot of volume to progress. Like I would go through reasonably long plateaus that almost invariably would be broken by increasing my training volume, oftentimes quite substantially. Um, these days, if I attempted one of those programs, like I would just die.
Right. Because you're so much
And it's
stronger.
yeah, and it's hard to explain the difference. But like, you want to think like 80% of your max is 80% of your max, and doing a set number of sets at 80% is going to feel like doing that same number of sets with 80% regardless. But when 80% is 400 pounds versus 600 pounds, like
Sure.
those are just two different beasts.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, like I used to always benefit from increasing volume up to at one point like pretty ridiculous levels, and for the last 4 or 5 years, like when I've been making good strength gains, it's generally when I've used a lower volume and lower frequency approach to training. Um, so yeah, like that's flipped for me, and
Yeah.
I don't think that's typical, but I don't think it's unbelievably atypical.
What's a ridiculous volume you said that you went up to, as an example?
Um, so when I was doing like the Bulgarian style training, the version of it that I recommended publicly that people try was not the version of it that I personally was doing.
Mm.
um, so I was training 3 times a day. In the morning,
Wow.
work up to a daily max. Well, I also say daily max because I recommended people work up until they start grinding, but not until they missed reps. I would just work up until I missed for both bench and squat. In the
Three times a
morning,
day.
no, well, not 3 times a day. So morning and early afternoon sessions, I'd work up until I missed both squat and bench, and then probably do like 6 or 8 back off sets. So like 12 to 16 back off sets per day. Uh, and then in the evening, so I was working at a gym at the time, and when all of us coaches got off the clock, we would do like bodybuilding workouts together. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'd put in another like hour and a half getting my pump on,
Jeez.
and doing that like 7 days a week. Well, actually, mostly 6 days a week. Um, but yeah, like I would not want to go back and
Yeah, man.
tabulate
Holy
my
crap.
volume for the summer, but it was absurd.
Do you
Um,
think that helped you get any further along, or if you had just stuck with, let's say traditional training, you'd still be at the same place you are now? You would eventually still gotten here.
so that's a good question. That's a really good question. And this is one of my philosophical hangups with like training studies in general.
Mm.
Because like ultimately, what a training study is doing is it's looking at how people progress on two different programs or two different training approaches for anywhere between 6 weeks and maybe 6 months or so. And that doesn't inherently tell you that one approach to training is better for long-term progress than the other. It tells you that it was better for like rate of strength gains over the period of time that study took place. So, it could be that there's like a level of strength that is your quote unquote genetic limit. And maybe if you use like optimized programs or something, like you reach that in 5 years or something, versus like less optimized programs, maybe you reach it in 8 years, but like you're
Mm-hmm.
going to the same place regardless. And then the question of, if you plan on being under the bar and putting in the work your whole life, like, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, like ultimately, does that really matter?
Right.
And if it doesn't, then, maybe you should think more about how can I train to still progress while minimizing risk versus how should I train just to maximize rate of progress. Um, and honestly, I don't have good answers to that. Like, it could be that training that gives you faster gains also allows you to like reach a higher level than you otherwise would have been capable of. Um, but it could be that ultimately it's a tortoise and the hare. So
Yeah.
I really don't know. I personally feel like it was good for my long-term development.
Mhm.
Because before I tried it, I'd um, I'd been kind of around the same level for 5 or 6 years. And then when I gave it a shot, like I put 100 pounds on my squat. Um,
Okay.
and like, so I put 100 pounds on my squat from the point where it was at the time, and 70 pounds or 75 pounds over my like all-time PR on the squat, which was
Wow.
like a level that I had never even been close to before.
Yeah.
Similar on the bench and deadlift. It was like a 45-pound gain in 10 weeks and 20 pounds over the best I've been all time. So
Wow.
that's like more similar to maybe it was just more like normal programming. But yeah, I personally feel like it was beneficial for me from like a long-term perspective as well. But uh, I don't have a clone of myself to
Right.
go back and not do that on. So I can't claim that I can know that for sure.